Good evening to everyone. Chodesh Tov. We inaugurate today, while it's the 30th day of Cheshvan, it is the first, technically, we call it the Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the Rosh Chodesh celebration. And we hope that everybody, as we enter this wonderful new month of Kislev, may it be a harbinger for good health, prosperity. Of course, today, two things. Today we had a terrible tragedy in Yerushalayim, a man-made tragedy, of course, wherein one person was killed, a yeshiva boy who lived in Har Nof, due to two explosions at different parts in the city. We must daven and pray. Number one, for of course, to say Tehillim in memory of this young man, and of course, to wish the more than a dozen people a refuah shlema from their wounds, and to wish every success to our wonderful police and all of the people who are involved in working to protect Klal Yisrael. May Hashem grant them success in finding the perpetrators of this awful act. Also, this evening we've just completed this evening the yortzeit of my beloved father-in-law, Gad Yehuda ben Shlomo Zalman, my wife's father, and this is his, I believe, 21st yortzeit. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu grant his soul and aliyah, and may he grant us continued inspiration from the wonderful life that he lived. Okay, we're ready to get started with Parshat Toldot, and of course, there's so much that one can talk about in this parsha and others. Of course, every parsha has a great deal of opportunity for us to glean inspiration. But I'm going to choose tonight a section which is not so well known. It is known, of course, but it's not spoken about a great deal. And that is the parsha of Yitzchak Avinu and the difficulties that he had with the Plishtim. In actuality, this week's parsha, which is found on what we'll be talking about, is at Shlishi in Parshat Toldot, Per Kaf Vav, Pasuk Yud Gimel, and Psukim that follow. This has to do with Yitzchak Avinu's sojourn into Eretz Plishtim. Technically, he didn't leave Eretz Yisrael, but part of it was occupied by the Plishtim, Avimelech, and those who were subservient to him. So today we're going to analyze a number of things. First of all, we're going to analyze Yitzchak's personality, remarkable personality. He does not seem to have the charisma at all of Avram Avinu or Yaakov. His story is not as prolonged as either of them. But we can see here that Yitzchak Avinu was a man of great persistence. That's number one. That, as a matter of fact, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says, the courage of persistence. That's what he had. It takes courage to be persistent, as we will see this evening. And also, of course, he was a person who revered his father and taught subsequent generations how important it is that we do not lose sight of what our forebears achieved, what their goals and objectives were. And Yitzchak is the person that we can turn to, and we will see that will become evident from the psukim themselves, not because of Meforshim necessarily, but because of the very psukim themselves. And we're also going to explore the idea, I hope, if I don't talk too long, I hope that we will explore the concept of Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. Now, this is a well-known phrase, and it actually has a dual meaning to it. Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim means the actions of our predecessors are, you can look at it as number one, as it is a sign for what will happen in the future. It will be a foreshadowing of the future. Also, Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim is the way our ancestors acted, that in difficult times. That's a lesson for us. So now, without any further ado, let's get into
here's
Chavav, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Now, we learn here about Yitzchak he went in actually into the Eretz Plishtim, and actually we can go one pasuk before that. Vayizra Yitzchak ba'aretz hahi. Yitzchak seeded or planted in that land. Vayimtza b'shana hahi, and he found in that year me'ah she'arim. Okay, Vayavarchei Hashem. Now, many people mistakenly believe that Me'ah Sharim means 100 gates. In reality, it doesn't mean 100 gates. In reality, it means 100 measures. That Yitzchak Avinu was so successful in his enterprise there, agricultural enterprise, spiritually too, I'm sure, that he, for every measure that the Plishtim had, he had 100. So that in itself, of course, will lead us to the second issue, and that is of the first incidence of anti-Semitism. Parenthetically, I'd like to point out that the city, or the shall we say, the neighborhood called Me'ah Sharim has an interesting history. It was the second Jewish settlement founded outside of the walls of Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. 95% of Jerusalem's history is within the walls of Yerushalayim. It's not on Ben Yehuda Street, and it's not in Beit Vagan nor Har Nof, and all of those are magnificent. They're all sacred. But the history, if you want to learn the history of Yerushalayim, you need to look for the 95% of the time of Yerushalayim's existence up until 1860. But from the time of David HaMelech until 1860, Jews lived in Yerushalayim exclusively within the walls of Yerushalayim. But in 1874, there was the second settlement. The first settlement was, I believe, in 1860, Mishkenot Sha'ananim, which was actually the brainchild and was supported by Judah Turo and Moshe Montefiore. Both of them were the not only the creators but the supporters of these two enterprises, particularly Mishkenot Sha'ananim. But we're going to talk about Me'ah Sharim. Why? How did it get the name Me'ah Sharim? Well, it's not because it had 100 gates. It was inaugurated in 1874 on Parshat Toldot. So the people who were involved in that first neighborhood, they had to be real sturdy pioneers. The people who were involved in that neighborhood looked to the Parsha and saw the various different events of Parshat Toldot. And of course, there are many they could have chosen from, and they chose Me'ah Sha'arim. But of course, they did realize it doesn't mean 100 gates. It means 100 measures. And the bracha that they hope they would have is an extension of the bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed upon Yitzchak Avinu. And it says specifically in Pasuk Yud Bet Vayevarchehu Hashem. Hashem blessed him. And it is because of that blessing that any prosperity that we have comes about from Hashem. And the very next pasuk, Yud Gimel, says, Vayigdal Aish. Watch the key word here. This is a milah mancha. It's a word which indicates to us what the basic theme. Vayigdal Aish, the man, meaning to say Yitzchak, became great. Vayelech haloch v'gadel ad ki gadal ma'od. Well, you can't really miss the lead word there, and it is the shorish is gadal, to become great, to proliferate. And so the Torah goes out of its way to tell us to the degree that Yitzchak prospered in his new environment. Vayihi lo miknei tzon u'miknei vakar v'avuda rabah. He had great flocks, great possessions. Mikneh means usually animals, but it comes from the word liknot. It's something which actually, it was almost like legal tender. You would buy, you could buy animals that and sell and trade animals, etc. He had all of that, and then va'avuda rabbi, and he was involved in a great enterprise. He was growing by leaps and bounds. And then the pasuk tells us the telling words, "Vaikanu oto velishti." The people who lived under Avimelech, who lived there, they were jealous. Now, in Hebrew, the word kin'ah can mean usually it can be negative or positive. Kin'ah be or et, vaikanu oto. They were jealous of him. That means that they, in some way, shape, or form, one of two things happen in their minds. One, why is he rich and we're not? Or he is rich because he took from us. So this means the negative form of jealousy. Then the Torah tells us in the next pasuk, "V'chol habeirot asher chaferu avdei avi." All of the wells. Remember, wells, of course, in any society, certainly in not only in the Middle East, but in the ancient world, were directly necessary to the population being able to thrive. The Chol HaBeirot and all of the wells, Asher Chasaru Avdei Aviv, that the servants of his father, Bimei Avram, his father being Avram, notice, by the way, the Torah goes out of its way to link Yitzchak to Avraham. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, oftentimes, not oftentimes, but at least in a couple of his beautiful essays, and by the way, this is a good thing to have in your library. Covenant and conversation on each of the 5 books of the Torah. Plus, he just was a prolific writer. He writes beautifully with clarity and organizational skill. So if you want to, I usually tell my students, so you tell your parents, if you really love me, here's the sefer you'll get from me. I don't know how well that works, but, and Baruch Hashem, I have it in my library, but if you really love yourself, this is a book. I get no royalties from this. I'm just telling you, if you want to be inspired by a 20th and 21st century thinker who was completely dedicated to the Jewish people, yet just buy it one at a time as we go through this forum. And what he said was that their young people, teenagers, and particularly trying to establish their identity, oftentimes do so by separating themselves from their parents, separating themselves. Now, that doesn't make it necessarily bad. We're not talking about necessarily a hostile separation. Sometimes, God forbid, it is. But it means to say that, of course, young people, and we probably all experience this to some degree, that urge to, I need to establish who I am. So And one of the ways people do, unfortunately, or fortunately, it's okay if it's healthy, is by establishing what they do well. And they don't, if their father was a doctor, they don't have to be a doctor. They can also be a shoe salesman and be a wonderful tzaddik as well. But the Torah goes out of its way. You'll see, you'll be amazed at how many times Avram Avinu's name is mentioned in these few psukim. Why? Because Yitzchak, when he dug, he knew that his father Avraham dug wells, and each of the wells that Avraham dug had a name attached to it. So not only did Yitzchak dig up and shall we say rejuvenate the wells that Avraham Avinu dug, but he maintained the same names that Avraham gave them, and they all had to do with God. They all had to do with Hashem Yisborach being the nurturer of the people. And therefore, the people, the Plishtim who lived there, were forced to say that name. Again, the issue wasn't to try to trick them, but they said it over and over and over again. All right, so he used the exact same names. Why? Because he knew if he gave, I want to read, instead of telling you, I'm going to read for you. The Medrash HaGadol, which is the 14th century, 1300s, written in the 1300s, it certainly has the status of Medrash. It's one of the newer Midrashim rather than the older ones. Second. Here we go. The Medrash HaGadol writes the following, that Yitzchak gave the wells, the names, the very same names that his father gave to those wells, okay? Notice he talks about human nature. What is this teaching us? Adam konelo bayit, a person, he purchases a house. The korelo shem, and he gives it a name, right? Kishaomed beno. So when his son gets old enough, u'mechadesh bo davar, and he himself purchases something, u'korelo shem acher, he gives it another name. Nothing terrible. It's not. There's no avera in that. But he in a sense erases the parents' earlier accomplishment. Well, Yitzchak Avinu, says the Medrash HaGadol, he wasn't that. Elo kol habeirot shechafar Avram, all of the wells that Avram Avinu dug. Avram Avinu, the Karalahem Shem, he gave them a specific name. Those names that he gave, Afal Pisha Amdu Plishtim V'Sitamu Otan. Even though the Plishtim actually went, and here's a perfect example. Talk about hate. They stopped up the wells which they were benefiting from. Right? The Yitzchak Chatzar v'Chafaran Shniya. Then rebuilt them. He redug them. Okay. By the way, that's the depth of hate. Might mention that in his essay, Rabbi Sachs says that not only does hate destroy the hated, it also destroys the hater, because they themselves were willing to suffer, and they were happy to do that, provided that Avram Avinu suffered. And yes, I agree that in fact we see that in the Intifada and other when we fight our enemies now, they're perfectly willing to blow themselves up and perfectly willing to actually lose their own children as long as they can kill our children. So that is, of course, that's the sad part of the hater. And again, I always say, of course, not every one of the people who live in Gaza or in the Palestinian territories are bad. But those who are, the one that did what he did, or those who planned and carried out what they did today, they are haters. And in the end, it certainly works against their own people, but they don't care, because the hatred for Jews, it exceeds their own love. That's what definition of a zealot. We Jews have had zealots in our past too. We remember them on Tisha B'Av. The hallmark of every zealot is that they hate their enemy more than they love their own people. When that happens, they are perfectly willing to risk the lives and the welfare of their own. So that's what the Pelishtim did. They didn't, V'lamakach, why? Why didn't he change the names? Says the Medrash, Rabbi, why didn't Yitzchak change the names of the well? Give him put his own touch onto it, right? It is because of his own humility. His father was great. His father was the founder of the movement of monotheism in the world. He was not going to change that. And so therefore, because he was Noeg, now the Medrash says, because he was Noeg kavod to his father, Avraham, so therefore, his is the only name which wasn't changed. Avram was changed to Avraham, Sarai was changed to Sarah, and Yaakov was Yisrael. This man's name, Yitzchak, not changed because he honored the name of his father. And that's the Medrash, that's the idea of the Medrash Agadol on this. Now, by the way, what are they arguing about? Are these, here? They're arguing over water. It hasn't changed. In 3,800 years, it hasn't changed. Just a couple of months ago, Israel and Lebanon completed an agreement. Hopefully, it'll work out well for both sides. Particularly, of course, we're concerned with Israel, but hopefully it'll work out for both sides. That, they discovered in the, 10 years ago, probably, or more, an extraordinary natural gas find in the Mediterranean, right near the borders of what we would call the maritime borders of Lebanon and Eretz Israel and Medinat Yisrael. Israel probably, I don't know, I'm certainly not I'm not a surveyor of the oceans, but from what I've been reading, Israel had a very strong claim to all of it, or almost all of it. But they entered into negotiations with Lebanon over water again, but the gas which is within the water, and the natural gas. And Baruch Hashem, they just recently signed the first real agreement between Israel and Lebanon, which is not based upon an armistice or a war. And even though, of course, the Lebanese said, well, this doesn't mean that there's a change in our relationship, but everybody knows there is. When you come to an agreement without firing at each other, then there's a change. So Bezrat Hashem, may it be so. May it be so that and hopefully there's enough of the wealth of the natural gas which is there to benefit both populations. But of course, we're concerned about Eretz Israel, Medina. So that's all of that here. Now, I want to conclude. See, do I have time? Yeah. I want to conclude with a magnificent statement by the Ramban. Ramban begins by saying, Ramban says, ultimately, what did Yitzchak do? Yitzchak, when he dug a well, Pelishtim covered it up. When they dug another well, Pelishtim covered it up. The first well he called Asek, and the second well he gave the name Sitna. The first well, which was Asek that they covered up, he called it Asek because it was contested. Again, water contesting. And then the second one, Sitna. The Torah doesn't tell us why that they covered it up, not because of anything other than Sitna, which means disdain, hatred. That's what Sitna, Vaistemu. So the mem and the nun can be interchangeable. So he said, here's why they covered it up, because not because we couldn't get along together, there was enough water for everybody. And Avraham Avinu was the one who instituted all of these wells that were here. Yitzchak then dug new ones up. But one other thing I want to say about it, and that is, if you recall, I mentioned Avraham Avinu had a 4-point plan to counteract the evils of the Migdal Bavel, way back in Parshat Noach, and that they built out of their own hubris and feeling and sense that we can conquer all. So Avraham Avinu was the only one to protest. And when Hashem put a stop to the project, Avram Avinu now set in motion his 4-point plan to restore the appreciation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to mankind. The first step was he created the concept, the symbolism of the tent. That in contrast to the magnificent tower, Avram Avinu set up simply the tent. Wherever he went in Parshat Lecha, he set up his tent. He pitched his tent. The tent becomes the symbol of not only the Jewish home, but the Jewish family, the Ohel Sarah, etc., that becomes the symbol of the Jewish family. And what else did Nimrod do with that tower back then? He wanted to destroy the family because he wanted to remove the loyalty that people had for their families and transfer that loyalty to the state. We have to be very careful. Nowadays, we're seeing also family is threatened. So we have to be very, very careful. The family is threatened. And Avram Avinu knew that was so. So what did he do? He built an ohel, the tent, and he moved it, and the Torah goes out of its way to tell us. Second thing that Avram Avinu did was with each ohel, he built a mizbeach. So the tower was built, Migdal Bavel was built through the harnessing of fire, through kilns. Avram Avinu took the concept of fire and redirected from the hubris-filled operation of Migdal Bavel, and it's redirected to the fires of the Mizbeach. So that's part two. That's the second point. The third point that Avram Avinu instituted, we find in Parshat Vayera, and that is the Eshel. We talked about that last week, I believe. 2 weeks ago. We talked about the Eshel. The Eshel becomes an instrument for bringing people close to God, because the Eshel, we come close to God in one of three ways. Oh, probably more, but three that we know from the Eshel. One is intellectually. People, when they see the purposefulness of the world in which we live, they say, as Avram Avinu said, there must be a creator. Two, he used the Eshel, which may have been an orchard, used the fruit of the Eshel, feed people. That's the second way people come to God, when they see chesed in the world. Olam chesed. The third aspect is that the Eshel could and maybe did represent all three, was a hotel. Socially, when we socially get together and think about things that are important to think about, they can come to God. Now here's part four. Part four was the digging of the well. Avram Avinu moved from the Eshel, where people had to come to him in order to experience God. He actually dug wells to benefit people where they lived. Okay, and that was Avram Avinu's brilliance. And by doing that, he called each of the wells by a name, which is associated with God. That was Avram Avinu's 4-part plan for restoring people's understanding that there's a creator in the universe. Now, I just want to take a couple of minutes with the Ramban. The Ramban here is on Pasuk Chav and Chavbet, through Chavbet, and it's on the term Vayikra Shem HaBe'er Esek. We know that Yitzchak decided, I'm not going to fight with him. I'm just not going to fight. And that's what Rabbi Sachs says. It is the nobility and the courage of persistence. They dig up one well, I will move. I could fight. I could get into all kinds of disputes, but I'm not going to. He moves and he creates another well. The second well is Sitna. They cover that one too. Instead of fighting with them, what did he do? Vayatech Misham, picked himself up. Vayachpor be'eracheret. He left the Eretz Plishtim altogether. He moved away from them, and they didn't fight over that. I guess it wasn't worth their while to do that. Vayikra Shema Rechovot. He called it Rechovot. Vayomer Yata Hirchiv Hashem. Hashem has expanded for us to live Ufarina Ba'aretz, and we were fruitful in the land. Now, That, by the way, is the second city that not only is there Mea Sha'arim, which we have in Yerushalayim, a district in Yerushalayim, but there's, of course, Rehovot. If you think about it now, what is Rehovot? The Weizmann Institute is in Rehovot. The medical center from Hebrew University, Rehovot. The agricultural center is in Rehovot. I think that's also from Hebrew University. Ufarinu ba'aretz. It's not just that we happen to settle there. Ufarinu ba'aretz. We have gone and grown there. Finally, I do want to get, you're probably wondering when I'm going to get to Ramban. I'm ready now. Okay. The Ramban says to us that, I'm going to read it in Hebrew just at the beginning because it's beautifully written. Yisaper HaKatuv v'ya'arich b'inyan ha'beirot. Torah tells us in great detail the story of the wells. What's the value of this here? That's so good. So he dug wells. That's very nice. Maybe you can extract from that the idea that he, of course, identified the wells with Avram Avinu, good, and himself with Avram Avinu. But he says, in its simple text, it doesn't appear to be beneficial at all. But he says, here comes Maaseh Avot Siman Laban. He says, this, again, in both this particular story that we're concluding tonight, has within it both elements of Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, of the concept of the behavior of the Avot is symbolic of how we should act. Number one, we don't always have to, fighting is the last resort, not the first resort. And so Yitzchak found it to be, it's some people try to say it's a flaw in his character. I don't think so, not at all. He was a person who was dedicated to peaceful living, and so he moved rather than fight. It's by the way, we have the same thing with road rage now, right? If somebody cuts you off, what does everybody say? Don't get involved, just step back, so you'll be defensive, because nowadays you never know what kind of lunatic is behind the other wheel. So Yitzchak Avinu knew that there were lunatics there, all right? And so he just backed off. So says the Ramban, the first one he called Asek. Asek, he said, really is not just that event that happened there, but it's indicative of what will happen in the future. Asek is in memory of to honor the first of the Batei Mikdash. Again, in Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. Asek, that was a time when the first Beit HaMikdash was eventually conquered by Nebuchadnezzar. Sancheiriv was fighting with them. Before that, there was nothing but fighting from an external source. All right, and so that's Asek. The second well which Yitzchak dug, he named Sitna. Sitna means actually it's a form of contesting. All right, the word Satan comes from that. Satan also means to divert people from peace. All right. Second, he said is Sitna. What was Sitna? That was our own internal problem that we had, and as well, we see ultimately Rome destroyed that. Then says the Ramban, Hashlishi, what's the third well that is there? Rehovot. Hu habayit ha'atid sheyibaneh b'nei Rabbi Yameinu. This is representative of the third Beit HaMikdash, which will be built in our days. Hu ye'aseh b'lo riv u'matzah. That will be built without quarreling or fighting. That he said. And then he concludes by saying, and may HaKadosh Baruch Hu expand our boundaries. And by the way, we do know that the Ramban was a great believer. The Jews have a mitzvah to return to Eretz Yisrael and a mitzvah, especially to wherever possible, to take the land that Hashem gave for us. He's not that's mitzvah d'oraita. Not everybody agrees with him, but that's the Ramban. So Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim in both of its meanings. Then, of course, the idea of two beautiful cities that bear the names of the biblical names, Mea Sha'arim and Rehovot, which in each of them is prominent, each in its own way, by the way. Science and Rehovot, and intense isolationist too, religiosity, not a value judgment, but that they would be the first to agree that that's what you have to do. And then, of course, a person who is as great as Yitzchak was, never forgot greatness of his father, kept his father's legacy alive, so that we have it even to this day. Ad hayom hazeh. So want to wish everybody Chodesh Tov, Chodesh Kislev, and Emil Hashem. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Stop. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Happy Thanksgiving.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat
Only
shalom.
good news.
Yes, amen.